All right, everybody back?
I think so.
Anyone? All right, so instead of altering this one, I wanted to make a saddle so everybody can see. So I may as well just go ahead and make a saddle for this, and we'll adjust it. We'll just go all in. I'm going to attempt to make a compensated saddle. I've got the old saddle, so we'll somewhat mimic it. I'll put my own style on it. I could go exactly like it, but I think it's a little, and it's not vulgar, it's fine. It's just not what I would want. So I'll change it. And so I'm going to start with a blank. Now when I've got a thickness sander, a tiny little drum sander at the shop that I'll run my pieces through. So it's really quick. Now if I wasn't doing this all the time, I wouldn't invest that into it. I would buy blanks that are close to whatever I needed, and then you just sit there and then hand sand it on a piece of granite. So this one I've got pretty much exactly where I wanted it. It's like those baking shows where they show you how to do it, and they're like, oh, wait, there it is. I haven't cut it out yet, but I didn't figure that y'all would want to watch me sand for 10, 15 minutes. So, and I don't want to do it for 10 or 15 minutes either, because I haven't done it like that in years. Getting lazy. So, I'm going to show you the proper way to do it, because I see this a lot. I'll see a saddle, and it won't be flat, because someone had to work it down by hand, and that's hard to do. It's grunt work, it's not fun, and it'll, you'll see, yes, like if you're looking at the saddle this way, then I'll see saddles coming in the shop where someone's cut one themselves, and they'll be like dome shape, one side will be thinner, everything's just crazy, and it doesn't fit in the slot very good. So it's a tough thing to do. Just sanding something by hand is not easy. You think it would be. All right, so when I'm thicknessing one, I'll take a piece of granite. I'm going to do it on this because I got where I want to be. I'll start with something like 120. And by the way, if you're doing a lot of stuff, it's easy to waste sandpaper. And what I found is buying 3M sandpapers in rolls like this really save a lot. Because if I want to take and just sand a nut, I'll walk over here and just take a tiny little piece and rip it off, and I'll work out, and it saves a lot of sandpaper. You can get tape machines like this online. I ended up buying the Stu Max. I got probably 2 or 3 more of these at the shop with different tapes in it. Because they were running a sale, buy one get one half off. And so I just and I found that most of the Stu Mac ones I like, and they're cheaper than the ones I find on Amazon. And be careful; these things are sharp. I already cut myself this morning on one when you pull your tape off. If you get one of these, I run all my binding tapes and fretboard tapes, and you can cut all your tape yourself. When you're taping up a fingerboard. For me, in my application, I don't like spending half my day cutting tape up, so I buy them in all sorts of different sizes, different kinds of tapes, and different. I've got different tackiness, I guess you could say, of tapes.
Like automotive tape or guitars?
This is how about this from Stu Mac, and it's like a really tough masking tape. It's not low tack, so you have to be careful. Usually I get in the habit of almost every time I do something with a guitar, pull a piece off and just put it on my clothing. Put a bunch of them all the way down. There was a time I was doing I was refretting a Japanese Fender. Oh, that's me. I was refretting a Japanese Fender neck from the mid 80s or early 80s when they were having it built in Japan. and it was a really beautiful neck, had a great finish on it. It didn't have any wear, and it was a maple fingerboard. And I got finished up. I got the frets out. I got all the new frets in. I haven't damaged the finish whatsoever. I was so proud of myself. And so I taped up the board, and then spent all this time on the frets. It was super pretty. And then the way I tape boards is when I put tape on my board and I leave one side hanging off, and I run a whole piece of tape so I can pull that piece of tape, and I'm not spending all day trying to get the tape off. I'll show you when I tape up a board. And when I pull the tape off, it just pulled every lick of finish off of that guitar. I'm talking from one end. The beauty was I didn't have to do any kind of fingerboard prep because it literally, however they put a finish on that, it was just not stuck to the wood at all. And but another thing I didn't do was really make sure that my tape was low tack and didn't have the insight to know that finish. And if you do a repair work, that kind of stuff's never going to end. You know, when you build guitars, you've got control over everything. When you're repairing, you don't. You just, I mean, you have a bag of tricks that you know, and you have experience with things that you've done before, and you know when to not do something or to even just not take a job. There's guitars people bring in, I was like, it's not going to do it. And or I'm not the guy. You know, it's okay to say I'm not the guy. I don't know. I'm inept at that job. I do that with electronics all the time. It's like, if you brought me a guitar and the whole neck was snapped off, it would be great. But I don't know that capacitor. I don't know what I'm doing with that. But I can learn on your guitar, and they use it like instant conversation. But these days, for some reason, sometimes that doesn't even work. It's like, I don't care, I do. I want you to do it anyway. Right? Well, you know what you're getting into. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought again. Saddles. That's what we're doing. So I'm going to make a whole new saddle, and when I thickness this. When you lay it down on your granite, you're just going to rotate it. Just make sure you rotate it. Make sure it's real simple. When I first started out, I would count. Let's say I'm thicknessing this nut. I would lay it, finger in the center on the edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Rotate it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because even if you feel like you're pressing one way or you're pressing the other, or you're pressing this way or you're pressing that way. Flip it over, same thing. And to do all your rotation like that. And then check your fit, go back, check your fit, go back. Now when you get close where you feel like it's about to go in, then you can start with your other grits if you want to. It depends on what you want your nut to look like. If you're making a nut for harmony, you may want it to look like garbage. If you're trying to think what the original looked like. I love harmony guitars. I love vintage Gibsons. I would replace a bridge on let's say, I think the last one I did, it was maybe an L00, and it was the 40s maybe. Anyway, I had to make a whole nother bridge, and I had to make a saddle for it. And let's see if I can find a picture of it. Well, used to I would make them all nice and perfect, and let's see if we can find this. And what I decided to do was to make it look like Gibson, because there's I don't know how to explain it. Elegantly crude, I guess you could say. It has a look that you're not going to get anywhere else. I mean, it looks like the old Martin saddles. They're beautiful, especially if you've got one like we're going to pull out that '59 Martin. If it's the original saddle, all the blending up on the side of the saddle on that through saddle is pretty. can't multitask. My wife gets on to me all the time. Instagram. I post a lot of things on Instagram. We're gonna see if this shows up on the. Wish we could pull things up straight to the television.
Well, if you point it towards me, I can record it.
Or you can mirror it on your phone.
Yeah, you're young. Come here.
Yeah. If your phone's set up right.
This mirroring is done on Wi-Fi.
Oh, it's on Wi-Fi?
Yes,
Alright.
because I'm mirroring right now.
Yeah.
Well, we don't necessarily have to do this. We'll just, it's gonna take too long. We can't even find the photo anyway.
Okay, moving on.
All right, we'll move on. Anyway, sometimes you want to mimic what was originally there. And what was originally there was done quick and fast and dirty, and it looks good because it looks appropriate. And that's in the repair world. And if it's your guitar, maybe you don't want it to look like garbage. You want it to look nice, and you want it, I don't mean garbage like garbage. I mean that in a funny way.
Is this the one, is it a sunburst?
Let's see.
It'll stand out if you make it pretty on the.
Yeah,
rest
and it
of the-
does. It sticks out like a sore thumb. Oh, yeah. So if you look at the side of that, see how I purposely didn't fit it to the end of that?
Hold it up so I can see it.
Yeah, you're not gonna
Inception.
Yeah, I'll be able to tell.
Nice.
Don't move it. Can you see it?
Well, if you notice the saddle right there, it doesn't fit towards the end.
Yeah.
All that's perfect. And all that sludge that you see on the bridge,
Yeah.
all that's fake. That's a brand new bridge.
Yeah.
But it looks appropriate once you.
Even put a ding on the pearl there?
Yeah, all that, because that's brand new pearl. The pearl is actually sunken in down in there a little bit.
Okay, what's
Is
that?
that,
And what I would do is, I was lucky enough to have another one in the shop. I had the original bridge, and I would just look at that original bridge, I knew it hadn't been touched. And then I would copy that onto that Gibson, and then have, you get all these bags of tricks, like I keep saying, over the years of
yeah.
how to run
Is that
it.
a screw under, excuse me? Under-
Yeah, it's got a screw underneath. We'll get inside this Gibson, they did that all the way up.
Wow.
And even some of the modern ones. And those are dangerous because a lot of times your bridge will be coming off the guitar, but you don't know it because it's been bolted. And it'll cause problems. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. All right, so I'm gonna cut this saddle. And that's how I thickness sand one, to try to keep everything nice and level. And this has a pickup in it. So the way I've got this one going in, it'll actually just slide right down in there. I usually like to have if I don't have a pickup in there, I want it to almost like push in there. I'm not forcing it, you wouldn't want to have to like, just cram it down in there. I need a little bit of space there because I need that downwards pressure. Since he has chosen to have a pickup with an under saddle transducer, I need that to transfer the downwards pressure onto that transducer that's inside that slot. Y'all know if y'all ever taken one out of a set and see what a guitar pickup looks like inside of the slot, that's what's in there. So I don't need it to bind on the walls anywhere, but I don't want it to be able to flop around. I want it to be pretty darn snug. But I don't want it to bind. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is get my first round upper, because I'm square right now. I'm gonna do one side first. And my favorite file for this is just a Nicholson hardware store file, single cut. I got a double cut on that side, which I don't use very much, but my single cut. So I'm gonna take my saddle, I'm gonna hold it straight up like this. I usually don't do this in a vise. I probably should. I just never have. Mainly because when I want to cut this rounded edge, and that's the rounded edge for your slot, on the end of that slot here. go almost parallel to it with my file. It just disappeared. There it is. Almost like this, with a motion like that. I'm using the single cut edge. And that'll keep me pretty uniformed. Flip it. And then I'll have a rounded edge on there. Let's see what happens if I put.
There you go.
I'm finding it. Anybody see that at all?
Yeah.
So I got a rounded edge. I'm gonna put that in there. That's going to, I'll check the fit and it looks good. And that's gonna give me an idea where the other side is gonna be. If I left it square and butted it up, I would not have as good of a chance of marking the other side. You can use your calipers for this if you have some calipers, which is always good. So I could take, of course, my dial calipers and take a measurement and transfer that. And I'm just going to go with my pencil line. I've got a square, so I'm going to use it to make a line. Let's pretend you didn't have a square. Most people don't have a regular square handy. I would just take, if you've got one of these rules or another rule, you want to get as square as you can on that edge or make a line. And at this point I go over to, I've got a scroll saw. It's a shop, I would cut it on it. But let's say if I didn't, then jeweler saws are fairly readily available, usually at hobby shops. That's what a jeweler saw looks like. This is what I cut pearl with, if I ever cut pearl, if I'm ever forced to cut pearl. When I first started this, that was my goal. I remember saying, well, I got laid off from my job. What do I want to do for a living? I'm going to do pearl inlay. That was 19. And then I started doing some pearl inlay. And every once in a while we'll do it. I did it a while in banjos, but that's a labor of love because you'll spend many hours.
You gotta listen to it.
And then, so I'll cut it with a jeweler saw. And if you can't find a jeweler saw, you don't have one. These are X-Acto saws, and funny enough, the vet down the street from our old shop, they always called them bone saws because they went to the animals. They would go to the heart. They would use these X-Acto saws. You can get them in different thicknesses, 10,000ths, 20,000ths. Some people even use these to the slot, nut slots, like a 10,000 gauge nut slot. We'll talk about bottom of nut slots in a little bit when we eventually, if I can speed up and get us to making a nut. So you could use one of those. Typically, when you're using a saw like this, you would have a block and you're cutting like this. Like you're the scroll saw. If anyone knows what a scroll saw is, it's just, you would have a block with a hole cut in it, clamped onto a bench, and you're sawing like this. And then you're just, an organic scroll saw, basically.
Is that one of those saws where you don't want to push, right? Let the saw do the work because it'll snap?
Yeah. It'll snap this blade. I'm just letting it go, do its own thing. I'm only doing this because, I'm picturing being on my kitchen table, working on my guitar. All right. This, I'd take a piece of aluminum, go to Home Depot, get a flat stock of aluminum that's real long. You probably wouldn't have to grind it flat. And I put this on a piece of plate, on a piece of granite, and made sure it was flat. I put a strip of 80, 120, 320, 220, just like that. Labeled it, and so it's quick. I can go through grits if I need to sand something. Once I've got it in my vise, and this is one of the best things in the world, this little vise, and they're really not that expensive. It's this tiny vise I get from Stu Mac. I like it because I can get it in a good angle here. I use it for all sorts of stuff. I got an end on there because I'll put 2 magnets on there, and you can run a guitar pickup and change the orientation of the magnetic pull. But mostly I use it for nuts.
They're on sale for $43. Yeah.
Huh?
They're on sale for $33.
33?
I think they're 33.
Yeah, that's. That's just a good little vise. So I'm just squaring up this end. And I'm checking to see, and I think I'm gonna be good as soon as I round this over.
$37.
It went up.
20% off.
The best thing I ever did was get their, pay their $40 free shipping fee.
I wear them out.
Because I'm ordering for so much random stuff. More these days than I used to. I didn't. But I was younger, money was always an issue. And then after a while, you start to figure out if you're in a shop, it's just, I mean, do I build the jig or do I buy the jig? You know, I'm not, if I'm doing it as a hobby, I would just build the jig because it's fun. But I got to the point now where if I got a certain amount of hours in a day, then I need to be on the job instead of, you know. So you'll see me with a lot of, you know, LMI or Stu Mac stuff, which is not necessary. You know, they didn't, all these fancy tools and gadgets, they didn't have that in the 1800s. They were making guitars then and repairing them. These just make life easier. All right. Let's see which side I like better. It's 400 grit here.
Is that sandpaper adhesive?
Yeah, it's got a sticky back. Facing off this bottom, but I may change my mind about how I'm gonna really fine tune that up towards the end there. So right now I'm just getting a nice fit. All right, so we're lucky. We have a saddle that we want to somewhat mimic but change. We know we want to, on the low east side, we need to come down and we need to keep the high east side the same. So let's pretend I didn't have one. Then, well, this is a tough one. I've seen so many saddles. This is how I do it. I literally I sight, and I look, and then I draw my arch on there, and I know what it looks like when it's too tall. So I'm trying to think of a good way to do that. whatever you think is too tall, go there, and then some, because you can cut it down. You're just trying to get a fit, and then put the strings on it. We have a guide as it stands right now, so that's good. But just make it tall, even if you take the whole blank and do your arch right at the very top. That way you can get your strings on there, see where you need to go. After a while, you know, every time you pick up an acoustic guitar, sight the neck, see what the saddle looks like within relation to the end of the fingerboard. And you'll start to get an idea of, you know, if those guitars are set up right, about how tall that saddle is up. And every guitar is a little bit different because all neck sets aren't created equal. So now that I've got this fit the way I wanted.
How much would you like to have sticking up out of the saddle? I mean, out of the bridge?
Well, you know, we can, like if we were starting with this guitar, you know, that's about, we're gonna measure that, and that's about what I'd like to see. And typically, if the neck set's correct, about this height, starting out, and I would feel like that was going to be tall. This is obviously not tall enough. I mean, this is tall enough for this guitar, but almost dead on, except for that low E side. So with that said, if I sided this, I would have been making one. But I would say for 90% of guitars, this height that you see, which is about 14/64, then you could just go straight across and measure it.
When you're sighting down there, what are you seeing?
So when I sight, well, we can take turns coming down here and just looking. What I'm doing, I'll usually close one eye. I get low with the board, and I look. In one of them, I can see how high the saddle projects.
So you're sighting off of the nut and the end of the fret, like sights.
Yeah, like looking straight down the neck.
But the-
And then
the
so
nuts
what
are
I'm
the way-
seeing when I sight the neck would be, so if this was the end of the fingerboard, then what I'll see is right, if I'm looking past the end of that fingerboard and my eyes are level with it, I'm seeing a little bit, a tad bit of that bridge there. I can see the black, and then I can see, you know, the saddle sticking up. And that's what I'm doing when I'm looking off the bottom of that board. So to be on the safe side, I've never thought about this before. I've always just sighted down there. Then we're just gonna say, if you check your neck angle, and I have a long, y'all may have one here, a long straight edge.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna stop by the shop. I've got my short one here. I forgot my long one. Because that's,
I think we've got one here.
you know, if you got one here,
The long
Yeah, but it
No.
can't be too long.
one? No.
well, I just need it long enough to, you know, maybe 2 feet.
Yeah, I'll put it on. Okay.
Anyway, but let's just say I can take this projection all the way. I can demonstrate with this. So I'm looking here, and when I see a neck set, and the reason this saddle's already tall is the neck set on this guitar is a little high. And what I want to see is I want to see that the bottom of this straight edge, when I lay it across the frets, to be touching the top of the bridge. Okay, that's my neck projection. I'm not getting a full fair reading on this because my straight edge isn't all the way down here.
Yeah.
And I've got a marking over here where I get the neck off of, because I want to go in depth with neck resets and how to set your neck angle and how to fit your, you know, your dovetail. So that's why this saddle's looking taller than normal, because we've got, I suspect, a slightly overset neck, which I don't like to see overset necks. I'd rather see them slightly underset than overset. When you have an overset neck, you've got some issues that are inevitably going to happen.
That means the neck's too high up, right?
Yeah, that means the back neck angle is too far this way.
Probably didn't turn.
All right,
Could that be
so
because the strings are on?
what?
Could that be because it's not strong enough?
Yeah, one of it is because I'm not getting an accurate reading because I'm not all the way down here.
Oh, yeah.
And when you take the strings off, your neck's gonna go into usually a back angle, and so it's gonna give you a false reading too. So when you're setting a neck, I like to simulate your neck relief like strings would be on it, but putting tape, multiple pieces of tape, until I would measure 5/1000ths relief between the 12th fret, 1st fret, and the 5th fret with my gauge that I usually use. So I'm simulating the bow and the neck this way because that kicks a straight edge down and shows you it's a whole nother neck angle at that point. So when you set the neck, you'll have issues where you've got to figure out your top deflection, which is going to be really hard to do, and you almost can't do it if you're building your guitar, because your top deflect or top rise, I've always called it top deflection. That's a banjo term because technically that's the other way, you know. But on a banjo head, your top rise on a guitar, when you string this, the top of this is going to rise. If I'm doing most modern day guitars are 10 to 15. If I'm doing a pre-war Martin, they're typically up to 30,000ths rise, which is a lot. You know, the top will really come up. I measure that with one of these gauges. I'll put it on the top with string tension on there. I'll zero my gauge out, and then when I start to take the strings off, this dial is going to move because the top's going to go down. All right. Once that top goes down and your strings are off, the difference between the zero when you zeroed it out, if it's landing on the 15 away from zero, then it had 15,000ths top rise for that gauge string that you were using. For the lights, if it was medium, it'd probably have more top rise. So what that does is that makes your bridge stand taller. So it changes the anatomy of the guitar. So you can't really do that when you're first building a guitar. You're just guessing. You know, you're like, I don't know. This thing's never had strings. I don't know how much my top is going to rise. So if you were gonna, let's say you were gonna, if I was building another guitar, I would take the rule of thumb that Martin did. They made bridges in 3 different heights. They made bridges in, if I remember correctly, 5/16, 11/32, and 3/8. Okay, meaning that they could technically, and what I would do is set one and use a taller bridge, and then set my neck. And then if it has more top rise than I thought it was going to have, then I could shave it down while I was on the guitar and reprofile it. Does that make sense? The bridge itself, which is a no-no when you're working on when you're doing a, you know, vintage guitar. But if you're building, it can be whatever you want to.
Right.
So let's say I started with a 3/8 of an inch bridge, and I set my neck with no top rise tension or whatever. Because it's a new guitar, and I set my neck to that neck angle, then I actually put strings on it, and then my neck relief comes in and my top rise goes up. Now I'm underset, but I used the tallest bridge, so then I'm going to go back and take the time to get good at shaping bridges while they're on the guitar. Trying to make it, you know, but it's your guitar, so it can be any shape that you want to. If I was doing that with a let's say someone brought me a guitar, a Martin that didn't have a bridge, and the neck needed to be reset. I could use that idea and do that. Typically, what I would do is go ahead and make a bridge, and then put it on the guitar, and then string the guitar up. You know, but if the neck for some reason was already off the guitar, and I don't know what I'm doing, or what I'm working with, and I had to replace the bridge also, then I would. Start with their tallest bridge, make one, or buy one if it's a newer Martin. You know, your pre-40 Martin bridges look different. Like your 40s are different than your 50s. And then after the 50s, it kind of averages out. It's all about the round over on the back of it. Pre-50s are going to round over starting at the bottom of the back of the holes. And they're very elegant looking. You know, you don't see very many of them because usually if it's, you'll see square ones instead of the belly bridge. Modern day Martins, and then after the 50s, it's about a 1/4 inch behind the hole when they start rounding over towards the back of this bridge. And of course, the bridge, and that's your saddle.
Speaking of bridge, was there some philosophy behind Gibson doing their bridges upside down? They call them belly bridges? Or?
They may have thought that extra space in the front would help keep it from dipping forward, like the issue that you had. But then the other thought is if you put the material behind the bridge, it keeps this part from going up.
Yeah.
And you could just make a, your bridge is a top, your bridge is a top brace. Like it or not, your bridge, it doesn't hold the strings on at all. There's nothing about your bridge that actually keeps the strings on the guitar. It's your bridge plate underneath there. Unless you got a non-pin bridge. And most of those have hidden bolts under there somehow, but some of them don't. And I
What
don't see.
about those new pinless bridges that Santa Cruz does?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen those. I haven't messed around one of those.
Yeah.
thread
But I mean,
thread through like an electric.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I like pin bridges.
What do you call that style bridge? Like the Golden Era Martin has the through bridge.
Yeah, through saddle bridge.
What do you call that?
This bridge right here, that's a belly bridge. That's what we're gonna call. That's what we call it, and it's a pocket. It's got a pocket in there.
Okay.
All right. Prior to, I think it was 65 when they switched to a pocket bridge. They had a through bridge prior to that, even on their belly bridges and on their square bridges. You care to get your guitar out?
No, before.
Call it a drop-in bridge too.
Is that the?
Yeah, drop in saddle.
That's not even pyramidal.
Well, you got pyramid bridges, and they were doing that when they still make those. And this is the economy version of the pyramid bridge. This is the square bridge. Okay, so these are some of my favorite bridges. I love small bridges. They have a downside because they're thin. They don't have the extra belly back here. So tops want to torque easier. And they made the saddles through. This saddle's been out before.
Through.
But through meaning that how this goes all the way through to the sides. You can see the saddle.
Okay, yeah, old thing.
So if you ever put one of these in a guitar, glue them in. Don't assume that you can put one in and not glue it in, because you're going to eventually crack the face of this bridge off. Now you don't have to glue the whole thing in, but you have to at least glue those edges. You can turn it into a pocket bridge. You're not turning it into a pocket bridge, but you're doing the same thing by putting glue on this side and this side. Because the reason you have a pocket bridge is that extra wood there helps to keep this from popping out, of the front of that bridge from popping off. Because the bridge is pretty close to being quarter sawn. And a lot of them I see are quarter sawn. And the ones that are completely just straight up and down quarter sawn are the ones I have to replace from having cracks in it.
Yeah.
This one has got a crack in the bridge, and which is a little odd because the grain looks pretty darn good because it's quartered, but it's at a skew. Same way with bridge plates. Traditionally when we would make bridge plates, it's supposed to be quarter sawn across the grain. Well, if you've ever taken a quarter sawn piece of wood, it'll snap easy on the grain, So realistically, a flat sawn bridge is better. Bridge plate, I'm sorry, flat sawn bridge plate. And then quarter sawn bridges look good. And it's a brace, just like your braces on the inside. But you do want to have it, if all possible, quarter sawn, but kind of at a skew one way or the other. So it doesn't want to just snap
Yeah.
in two.
Strong that once.
Beautiful guitar.
Good enough to look inside.
Yeah.
We can do that anytime, now you're ready.
Is that ladder bridge?
Now that's going to be X brace. This is it's a 018,
15.
015, and the 015 is it's much like the 017, except you can tell those because those will have I think 2 dots at the
So,
or two dozen, 12.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's 40s?
It's like a triple O.
That's from the 40s?
That's 59.
59. They're all mahogany except for they made two, actually just two. I think in 1938 that was birch and no, maple and beech. I've never seen one, so only two. I read that somewhere. And, it's my favorite Martin size.
Yeah,
I have an 018 from 1964. It's not as cool as that.
while you're standing, did you do that repair? That's an L double O.
No, I don't, no, I may have, either me or.
It says the local lead repaired it.
It could have been, it could have been. Besides, I do so many of them.
Oh, okay. Well, look what he's asking, or repaired it.
$1,100.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's holding, if I did it. All right, back to the saddle. So, what I would do is, back to what you were talking about, Van, I would go, what was the measurements? What did I say, 1464s? Something around there, you know, taller than what you think you're gonna need, because you're gonna come down with it. Most of the time you're making yourself a saddle, you've already got one in there, it's on the guitar that you're doing.
So start out maybe 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna mark this using the old saddle. And then I'm gonna adjust it from there. All right, so what I've done was just literally traced it. I checked this one, that's my 16 radius, and I want to follow suit with it. Check with my, go ahead and grab my 16 radius gauge. I'm going to, on the low E side, that's when my low E is going to cross over. I'm going to move that down to 64ths or 1/32. We'll just use it. Then I'm going to transfer that, and if I'm on 16 on my radius, if I didn't have a radius gauge, I would use my saddle. I'm going to transfer.
And we're gonna start that, where that lower one is and then go back to where.
Yeah, I'm going to put my
Yeah, I got you.
radius gauge right on the, I don't want to change it on my high E. I'm going to go lay it on the same mark and then adjust my 16 radius gauge down onto the new mark that I made, which was 1/32 lower
Right.
than the other side. Then we got to cut this. What I usually do is I have at the shop a belt sander. I have the same thing that's in there, the rigid, the little orange. It works great. I love that thing.
One of them narrow belts?
No, it's
Bit wide.
yeah. No, I need to just take everybody in there and show you how I do it at the shop. You may have those kind of tools, but maybe we'll do that so we don't have to do that. Then I'll show you how to do it. Yeah, you need to stand up. Yeah, we just gotta get it out. Yeah.
Y'all could actually stay in there and watch it on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true. They could.
They could watch
Sat
it on
in
the
there and
screen.
watched it while you videoed it.
That's right.
He's gonna do it right there on that one.
Okay, they moved them over here?
Yeah.
I just got one of these, so I figured out how to change it.
Oh, yeah.
This belt's kind of wore out.
It's really cool too.
Yeah, you got anything else?
See if that's showing on the screen there.
It's looking good, Bob.
You might be able to see it better in there than in here. Here.
I can go away down.
Here, let me see that thing.
Get over here.
I have a love-hate relationship with this machine.
I think you're gonna need another belt. Flip that one over. Flip that one over.
That will make it work. We just gotta hog off some material. I went through probably 30 of these machines. Now that'll lock in there. It's got the, this is, maybe one of the old American ones.
If you had an older sibling within a year or so of your age, have the new parts. Yeah.
My cousin, sister, and same brother, sister, father.
Everybody get their arms off of this. Jim, I don't want you to lose an arm.
If that hits me like it works, it's
We're good. Is this, yeah? Okay. Alright, so
Threads.
we got a belt that's, dull, which is fine. It has a tracking gear. That's what happened here when it sucked out in there. At some point, that's where that goes. This is never going to be square on this machine. I'm just saying this because if you get more into this is going to be your most economical machine. So you get it. It works for a lot of things, and this is never really going to be square to that, or at least it's pretty that I've never had. But it's great because you got an oscillating sander that it'll go, and you can get them. A buddy of mine, Michael, found one on Craigslist for $100. You can get them brand new for like $299. So they work good for this kind of stuff. I never use the table. Again, I always freehand it. And I just need to cut this line, and then I can check everything else later. You know, so I want to be close to my line. All right. And we'll shrew it up on with a regular file.
Does it matter? Because obviously you're not going to be perfectly true to it, so does it matter if you're off like that or that, or will you fix
Now
it
you
with
want to
the
be
file?
as true as you can, but like I said, I can still see a tiny bit of my pencil mark, and I'm pretty square. I might be a little skewed that way.
Going back.
All right, so now let's say you don't have one of those. You can do the same thing with a jewelry saw. When we get back in here, I'll show you.
At some point, I want to get a good shot of all your special tools.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe at this point, because we do have some people that are real novices.
Okay.
And that will help them out. If you think about it.
say I didn't have that tool. I just didn't want y'all to have to sit here and watch me do this for. I'm just gonna quickly do this. Now with a jeweler saw, let's say, I've got a line that I drove here, let's say we're gonna do that, follow that whole arch. If you've got a little vise, or you've got even the edge of the table, you know, you can technically sit here and start that off with a jeweler saw, and then follow that line. It's good to have a little vacuum. You don't want to breathe that if you can. Pearl dust, if you get any kind of pearl, do not, whatever you do, make sure you don't breathe any of that in, because it's still shards of glass that you can't exhale. And so it's a big deal. And it's the scary thing about cutting pearl. So you really want a vacuum cleaner that you've rigged up that runs the whole time with a little spout, and then maybe a small one, because if it sucks up a piece of pearl, it's easy to go find. And even if you're like let's say you smoke cigarettes, if you cut pearl, don't go outside without really washing your hands and smoke. Even all the, you know, from what I understand, it's like, it's nasty, because you just can't breathe it back out. So it's just gonna stay there. And so be very careful. Bone probably does the same thing. I try not to breathe it.
When you were sanding that, did you know which end was high E and low E, or?
Yeah, well, one, because when I marked it, I marked it on the front of it.
Sure,
And then
you've done it enough times to know.
You're going to get real used to seeing one and seeing which side's lower too. And so I can look at it right here and tell which is my high side. This is my low side, and that's my high side. And I can still see a little bit of my line. And so I got a little bit of a light gap right there. This is my low side, and I'm going to try to fine tune that right now. And I'm keeping the top of this saddle flat, and I will continue to keep the top of this saddle flat the whole time, because we're going to make a compensated one. So we don't want to go ahead and dome it, you know, because we got to cut our compensation. I'm running a 3/32 saddle slot, so there's not really any reason for me to compensate this. But it looks good, and it makes everyone feel good. I will say that I probably wouldn't be able to hear any kind of intonation issues with it if I left it a straight saddle, and we always, up until modern day, they were all just crowned like that. In other words, Martin didn't leave you very much room to actually do some real compensation.
Hey Jason, on just a typical saddle, assuming the intonation is fine, do you put the peak or the crown, whatever you want to call it, basically in the center? Or, I mean, I've seen people that, you know, leave it kind of ramps on the front or the back.
Well, it's going to depend on where your closest where your intonation lines up. You know,
say for example, if you're replacing one, I mean, generally speaking, do you always start with a center crown like that and then adjust, or?
if I'm just doing a straight up crown,
Yeah.
I always go for the center, unless I know that, like some Gibsons were made where the saddle ramped up towards the front, like a nut.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially if you see that, and it's not crowned in the center, then you can check. More importantly, we were talking about intonation and why something's compensated. We got a couple of different compensation things going on here. We have your saddle, which is actually angled back, for compensating for the low strings. The reason, like if I take, this is a nifty little tool, I can take this and place it up against the nut and put it at the 12th fret. I could put it anywhere on here if I wanted to, whatever fret, but I'm going to put it at the 12th fret. And so, on a guitar, your 12th fret, from your nut to your 12th fret, is the same distance from your 12th fret to your saddle. In theory, But since we have a string that doesn't touch the fingerboard, it hovers over the board. When you press the string down, you're taking a wire, you're bending it down to the fingerboard, so it makes it sharp. It's no different than if you're gonna do a cool blues bend. You're just doing a micro bend down to the fingerboard. So that string's gonna play sharp from there to there. So what would you have to do? You would have to make it a lower pitch, you gotta make the string longer. See, that's how we set intonation. If it's sharp, we don't have a tuning machine here between this point and here, so we can't drop in pitch. The only way we can drop it in pitch is to make that string longer. So we gotta move the saddle back. If it was flat, if the note was flat, and this is compared to the open string, not the harmonic, because we don't play harmonics. We don't play full songs in harmonics. So you can quickly kind of check and see if the harmonic's the same. But realistically, from the open note, you press the 12th fret, and you're going to match that note. So if it was flat when you pressed, then you've got to shorten the length of the string. That's the only way to make it sharper. So then the saddle's got to move farther, because the shorter the string, you know. It took me forever to get that in my brain. I don't know why. I mean, it sounds real simple, but for some reason, until someone explained it to me, when they said, if you have a string length and you can't adjust it, what are you going to do to make it a lower pitch? You're going to have to make it longer. So then that's when I understood which direction to go, because I'd always get confused on which direction to go. Maybe that's because I'm not that smart. So if I take this and I flip it over, we will see that the front of this doesn't hit our saddle. I mean, I can fit this almost in there in between. That's how much farther back it goes. And I got these two little spikes here that I've set to show me where a saddle should technically sit. And that way when I've got a new bridge and I got to cut a saddle, I can put that on there, press this down, and it's going to make two little dots in that bridge that I can draw a line, and that's where I'm going to machine out my slide. And so which brings me to the year 1971, when a fella used to work for Revlon, the makeup company. So he was the guy that designed the lipstick tubes for lipstick. He had a female and a male part, designed it, and after he designed it, ordered the parts, accidentally, I think he ordered all male parts, like 1 million of them, didn't have any of the caps. So Revlon fired him. And then his buddy that worked in the Martin factory said, well, now I'm sorry you lost your job, why don't you come work for us? And he's like, well, I don't know anything about guitars. It's like, in my line of work, you don't have to. So he goes and works over there, and he explained him that same thing, but he didn't explain compensation. So he was the design guy. And what he did was he went back there after hours, and he was going through all the benches and the jigs and stuff, and found the scale length jig, and was reviewing all this stuff, and then found out that, well, wait a minute, this is longer. This is supposed to be the same distance from here to here, but this jig that they've got going on is too long, so there's a mistake in it. So he shortened the jig, and then put it back. And it wasn't on all the benches, it was just on like 1 or 2 maybe. And so the workers came back in, started building guitars, picked up their normal jig, put it on their guitars, and that's where they would decide where that bridge was going to be glued on. Because they weren't cut, the slots were already cut, but that's just where you glued the bridge on. It was depending on where the saddle slide. So from 1971 up until like 75, there's a fraction of all the guitars where the bridges are in the wrong spot. And then they rear their ugly heads. Now that's the story I always heard, and I don't know if that's a complete accurate story, but I'll have to tell it.
Is that jig, is it angled?
No, I'll pass this jig around. It's got two spikes on it.
What's that jig called?
Bridge saddle locator. That's what we can call it. I think that's what it is. It's a Stumac product.
Can you use it if you're
this slides up and down, so you can.
Okay, so you can adjust the spikes.
Can you use that if you're using like a tune-matic bridge?
Yeah, that'll help you out, especially if you can locate one.
Yeah.
I've used it to locate one. So, that's compensation. That's your intonation, not to be confused with equal temperament. Equal temperament is a fancy way to tell you that your guitar cannot play in tune and never will. Because the scale is an equal tempered scale. It's not just intonation. And when I say just intonation, that would be a scale where if you're going to play in the key of C, you would make sure that all these frets would play in the key of C perfectly. Now, if you're, but you would only be able to play in the key of C. When you switch something else, those frets would sound horrible. So what we do is we designed an equal tempered scale to where it averages out through the fingerboard. And beginners don't notice it, and professionals have already dealt with it. And what I find is so many times I have people that come in the shop, and when they come in, they say, my guitar's out of intonation, it doesn't play in tune. You know, can you fix this? Can you set my intonation? And I just really don't like to set people's intonation, because I think people should set their own intonation. Intonation is different than equal temperament. And what most of these players, when they start playing, and they've been playing for a little bit, they start to hear that equal temperament problem and confuse it for actual intonation issues, meaning that your scale length is off. When your scale length's not off, you've got a string, this is in tune with the 12th fret because you've set your saddle. When you play this fret, it's going to be sharp, sharper than your F, slightly sharp, and it's going to be sharp, sharp. It's going to start to get back into tune the closer you get to here. So, have you ever heard of like the way James Taylor tunes his guitar? You know, you've heard that. Some people have heard that when they start getting into this. His guitar, he tunes flat, this whole string flat, and then they're consistently flat until the high is just a little bit
I
flat.
think he changes the hertz. So
Yeah,
430.
he changes,
I think it's 440.
he changes, and we can test it out on these cool Peterson clip-on tuners. Because when I use this tuner, I can set it to, they're called sweeteners, is what Peterson's the company that makes the big strobe tuners, and they're real nice for, you know, setting intonation. And, you know, we used to have them, they would cost like $500 to $800, and then the technology caught up, and now Peterson sells a phone out for $10 that rivals the actual machinery. And then you can get a clip-on tuner that I've gotten to where I check this against the big tuner, the big strobe tuners that I have, and it does a great job, and I don't have to plug it in. It can just be on my headstock. So these sweeteners, I can scroll through, and when I scroll through to the ACU, which is the acoustic guitar, then come to find out that's the tuning that James Taylor uses to compensate for equal temperament. So when you tune your guitar with this, and we'll do that, and then we'll switch it back over to the regular tuner, you'll see how many cents off it made you tune your guitar flat to make it sound better in the first position. We've all played that G chord in the move to your D, and you're like, why is my D out of tune? You know, and that's equal temperament. It's everything's slightly off. Everything's slightly out of tune to average out to the best it can be.
Which you can get away with if you're playing by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and it used to drive me crazy. I was making shelf nuts and doing all sorts of stuff like that to try to compensate here and here. And finally, I just gave up and thought to myself, well, I mean, half of the singers out there that I like, they can't sing in tune. Hell, I can't at all. You know, I mean, I love Chris Christopherson. Does he have a good, pretty voice that sings in key all the time? And if he did, we probably wouldn't like it. You know, same with Johnny Cash and, you know.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Bob Dylan. I mean, I would love to take harmonica lessons from him. But we love those guys. And that's because it's just, you know, the guitar is the same way. Otherwise, we can just get keyboards and play those instead. So, that's one of the beauty of the guitar. It has its flaws, just like we do. We just want them to be perfect.
Jason, I can call that sweetener.
Yeah.
If you tune that like James Taylor tunes it,
Uh-huh.
so you're in the middle between both G and D then, I mean.
Yeah. When I read it, and we can check it again because that'll be fine. We can like write the things down if we have time. I think the low E was something like 10 cents flat, and then the A would be like 8 cents flat, and then the D would be, it was almost like 2 cents off, and then until it averaged out to like in tune on the high E.
So when you tune it with that, then when you play the G and D, they'll both sound sort of in tune.
Like all of them, like the E and the A and the G and the D, you're just kind of compensating to make them all. You're trying to make them sound the best they can in an equal timbre
I
scale.
gotta have one of those, where do you get that?
We'll get you one. I bought mine from here's tell you won't like paying for that tuner.
There's a wonderful YouTube video where he himself describes how he tunes his guitars
Uh-huh.
and why he tunes them the way he does.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Isn't that, didn't Eddie Van Halen used to do that? He'd detune his G on his Floyd Rose, so it would
Probably.
sound in tune when he did all that crazy tap and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure he was compensating for that. And the reason I tell people I want them to try to learn how to set their own intonation is that intonation also is the player. If I press that string harder than normal, than the person who's playing the guitar, it's going to be different. Because if you, especially a tall fret, if you press that string and you press it hard, it's going to go sharp. And if that's your natural way of playing, then you need to have compensated your saddle for that. If you're that anal, which is easy to do on an electric guitar because you can turn screws. On acoustic guitars, and it's tough, especially when you've only got a 30-second. I mean, this is what 3/32, so 93,000 some an inch thick. That's all we've got to work with, which isn't very much. Plus, the harder you pick, the attack of that string jumps sharp. As soon as you pick it, it's like sharp. If you'll see it on tuner, it'll go sharp. So some people don't play long, drawn-out notes, and so they want to intonate their guitar to the attack. And some people want to intonate their guitar to after the initial attack happens. So it's good to know how to intonate your own guitar, especially if it's on an acoustic, I wouldn't worry too much, unless you got a big wide saddle and you want to go there. But if it's an electric and you can adjust screws, then you can play around with it. You just adjust them back if you don't like it. So I'll use this file again. I can see my line. I'm just going to go ahead and true this up a little bit and get it more on the. Should check it instead of just going at it. Alright, so I'm happy with my 16 there. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is take a little bit more off. So if you want to, just to keep, you can make a line or something, write LE or something on one side if you wanted to. I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to get where my string spacing is. Really just between the G and the B. Because the way I'm going to cut this one is the way I like to cut. And I'm going to show you the different ways you can compensate. And remember that the top of our saddle is flat right now. We haven't caught. What I was doing there was just making sure it was a 16 radius. That's good. All right, so I'm gonna draw this on the board. I don't know what these are called. We can make up names for them today.
Hey, I know a good hack.
What'd you say?
I said, I know a good hack. You know, like a little hacks for this and that. So if you ever buy a store-bought fretboard, fingerboard, whatever you want to call it, that you're using on a bill, and you wind up